The reality is that without integration, you're not getting the most from those experiences. When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. As an integration specialist and breathwork facilitator, I'm invested in making the dynamic landscape of personal evolution accessible. My goal is to inspire you to take action for yourself. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. Before we jump into today's show, if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It's an easy, free way to support the show, help more people discover these simple, life-changing practices. Also, share it with a friend. Like Ram Dass said, we're just walking each other home. My mission is that this podcast can be a part of that journey. So this is a solo cast about how I stopped drinking. It's been about 5 years now since that happened this time around. It's not the first time. And the inspiration for this episode actually came from a piece of content that I posted on social media that's done pretty well as far as content goes. You know, I haven't gotten to one of those super viral pieces of content yet that gets millions of views. But there are a few that, have gone over 10,000, and this is one of them. And it was just a simple clip of, talking about here's where I was 6 years ago at the beginning of this particular part of my journey, and here's where I am now. And it's gotten a lot of comments. I'm always appreciative that people are resonating with content that I put out, but there was one comment in particular that really caught my eye when it was like, how'd you stop drinking? Did you have withdrawals? Like, what did you do? And my initial response was like, wow, this is too big of a topic for just like, couple sentences. But I also thought it would be a good idea for a podcast. So today I'm going to talk about my journey a little bit. So just to give you some context, there's a much bigger part of the story, and a bigger part of the story that contributes to my drinking and also letting go of that. But just to keep it succinct, you could say that the current chapter, if you will, of the journey that I'm on started at the very end of 2018. In fact, you could probably say it started at the beginning of 2018, but didn't start to actually bear any fruit or see any changes until the very end of 2018. And at the end of 2018, I left my marriage, and being on my own, trying to recover from a lot of grief, a lot of heartache. It wasn't easy to leave that situation for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I really felt very strongly about in that initial time period was that even though I felt like it would be justified for me to behave like the victim, to say, well, this was her fault. I've been wronged. I've been put out. I've been abused verbally and sometimes physically, definitely emotionally. It would have been easy for me to do that. And I didn't want to. I didn't think that that was right. I wanted to take accountability for myself, that even though I was in this situation, even though I had suffered the slings and arrows, as the saying goes, that I also played a part in what happened. And if no if nothing else, that I had stayed in the relationship for far too long, that there was something there to look at within myself, that there was a lot of grief and pain to heal. And maybe most importantly, that I wanted this moment to be a turning point. I did not want to end up back in the same type of a situation with the same type of partner. And even though my two major relationships up to that point, in certain ways, they were both very different people. But in other ways, there were similarities that I was seeing, especially as far as their own histories. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that I didn't end up with the same type of person. And I knew I needed to do some work on myself. And so that's kind of where we start. And at that point, this is let's say the beginning of 2019, just to make it easy. At that point, I was basically ready to give up drinking. But I don't want to give the impression that I just woke up one day and was like, oh, this is part of the problem, and then I quit. Actually, the process to quit drinking alcohol took several years. It started in 2015. And in 2015, I went to the Movement Music Festival, which is primarily a techno music festival in Detroit in May, Memorial Day. And I had eaten a decent amount of mushrooms and was also drinking pretty heavily. And there was this night, there was a lot of like thunderstorms and lightning, and the festival kept getting sort of temporarily shut down because of the weather. And every time that it would get shut down, we would either go back to the room or go to a bar and drink. And there was two things that happened that night. One was, I didn't really know this until the next day, but at least for me, mushrooms completely suppresses my tolerance for alcohol. And I kept drinking and drinking and drinking. And I woke up the next day with the worst hangover of my life, as well as a pretty clear sort of message of, oh, you need to stop doing that. And the other part was, and this is a little bit more subtle, but that night there was like a part of my personality that emerged. And I'd only really experienced this part of myself one other time during a mushroom journey. And I think looking back on it, it would pop out at different times, albeit in a much shorter fashion, when I would really be drinking to excess. And it was a very dark part of my personality. It's a part that I can't say that I'm very proud of. It's just, if I had to really explain it quickly without going too far off the deep end, it is a part of me with like limitless darkness. It's like a dark pit, or, like a deep ocean that just, you can't see the bottom. It goes down a lot further than you think. And it's almost overwhelming in just the sheer darkness of it. And, that original evening at the festival, I just embraced it. I really let myself like sort of get taken over by this part for pretty much, the whole night. So hours and hours. And that in itself was a really interesting experience. But again, when I woke up with this massive, massive, massive hangover, the message was really clear that I needed to stop. And that was in 2015. It didn't sink in. I kept getting the same message though, because it wasn't sinking in. I would get that message when I would get really, really drunk, because I never created good habits around drinking responsibly. The first time I drank when I was a teenager, I blacked out, drank like half a bottle of Jameson, and was lucky that I didn't end up in the hospital. And then I had a history of doing that, definitely through high school. I stopped drinking in my early 20s for 7 years. And then I went back to it around 2013. And there's some reasons behind that. But again, I don't want to go too far off tangent. But yeah, from 2015 to 2018, from 2013 to like 2019, there was this seesaw, this yo-yo effect where I would take a break, I would try to stop. One of the things that was really challenging about that, I could say there was two things, because now we're getting into the how I actually did this. So one thing was there was a ton of unprocessed emotions and trauma and grief and other emotions that I just didn't know how to process. I didn't have the resources to really work through them. And so drinking was a lot easier as far as dealing with it. And then the second part, and this is a big part of it as well, as far as, if I'm giving somebody advice or sharing my experience of how I stopped drinking, it was that my ex-wife and my best friend at the time were both alcoholics. They both loved to drink. And so a lot of my social life, the majority of my social life, and in some ways my identity, was enmeshed with drinking. And, in a way, it's a very subtle thing that the mind can do to justify its behavior. It's like, oh, well, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a connoisseur. I want to go out and I want to try different types of beer and have flights and, be really well versed and, well educated and have a really defined flavor palette and try new things. And for a while, that was a big part of my life, was like, work all week. And then, a few times a week after work, go out and, drink the exciting beer, really amazing craft beers, IPAs and sours and really strong stouts. And then on the weekend, go find what brewery has these amazing beers that I really love. And, it was like, oh, this is an experience. I'm not just sitting in my house, like drinking like a handle of vodka or something like that. So I must not have a problem. Even though in the back of my mind, there's pretty much the whole time was this recurring message that would come up, definitely when I would take mushrooms, of like, yo, you got to stop doing this. And then this back and forth of like, I've heard this message, I've heard it several times, and I don't know what to do. Like I said, I would take breaks, I would cut back, I'd, practice moderation, blah, blah, blah. But between my own unhealed parts and the environment that I was in, it didn't really stick. So that's one thing that you can do if you're looking to make a major change in your life, is get really honest about whether the people around you are supporting the life that you want to live. Not the life that you're living now, but the life that you want to live and the goals that you want to accomplish and the things that you want to do, not necessarily the things that you're doing now. And, the reality is, for a lot of people, the answer to that question is going to be no. And you're going to need to look at your life and make some decisions about what's going to change. Because the reality is that those people aren't going to change just because you want to change. In fact, there's a good chance that they're going to get resentful of you for changing, either because they're afraid that they're losing you, or that your growth and your change is reflecting parts of themselves that they're ashamed of or that they're not happy with. And so that's going to create some friction, or just that, they're not ready. And if you don't want to do it, they're much happier being in their misery or their situation, depending on how you want to look at it, than, being friends. It's, I'm not trying to depress you. It's just a reality. So that was a big part of it. And then, for me, to go back to my story, I still was not all the time blackout drinking, but definitely drinking to excess, drinking to the point where I would throw up. Definitely a few times of, blacking out within that. And every time that would happen, it was just, I would get so upset, so depressed with myself. There'd be so much shame of God, how many times have you done this? Why can't you get it together? Why do you keep repeating this cycle? So the next big thing that changed in my life that helped me to stop drinking was going back to therapy. I really think that therapy, especially if you are in a place where you're trying to make a major change and it's not happening on your own, get some outside help. Work with a good coach, find a good therapist, find somebody that you can actually resonate with and that you feel like you can work with and you can be honest with. Because a good therapist is going to be honest with you. In fact, one of the things that got me out of the marriage was sitting there and just complaining about my ex-wife and feeling angry. And my therapist looked at me really just plainly and said, "So your wife's an alcoholic?" And once I was like, "Yeah, okay." He said, "So you're going to be taking care of her for the rest of your life then, right? You're okay with that?" And my initial response was yes. And it really wasn't okay. And, as I turned that over in my mind, it eventually created the situation where I could leave. But, there was a lot of dysfunction at that point. She would drink so much that she couldn't get up the stairs. And so I used to have this, routine of getting up in the middle of the night, going downstairs and getting her up off the couch and bringing her upstairs, and, having to walk behind her so she didn't have to worry about, falling down the stairs because she couldn't make it up on her own. And then after a while, I was just like, screw that. She's a big girl. She can, she's making her own decisions. So if she's going to sleep downstairs, she's going to sleep downstairs. And it took somebody, compassionately but firmly saying, "Are you cool with that? That's your life. And it's going to be your life unless you decide to change something, because again, she's not doing it. You've tried talking to her, you've tried doing other things. It's obvious that that's not going to change." So having somebody that can help you reflect and mirror things back and help you see things in a way that might be challenging on your own. That's another big piece of how I stopped drinking. And I definitely recommend it to everyone. To kind of complement that, I would also say a good journaling practice. Journaling is so underrated as far as having an honest dialogue with yourself. And one of the reasons I think it's so important is that I'm going to go out on a limb and generalize a bit. Whatever it is in your life right now that you're not happy with, whatever it is that you would like to change or that you're working on or that you feel stuck and, there's resistance, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you actually do know what to do. It's not that you're completely lost, and it's not that you don't know what you need to do. It's not that you don't know what's wrong. You do know what to do. It's just that it's safer, easier, more comfortable, or too hard to take that first step towards your change and the change that you want to, the change that you need to make to create the circumstances for the life that you want, that change that you're trying to achieve. And so journaling is a great way to start to get some clarity behind this. Don't just rely on an hour a week with a therapist. Like, you need to be doing that work and that reflection and introspection on your own as well. So, a lot of the time we have guided practices on this show, meditations and breath work and all types of different somatic practices. Here's the practice for today's show. Take a journal, and if you don't have a journal, go get yourself a notebook from Walmart or Target or whatever. And I want you to sit down, could be have a nice morning beverage, and then sit down and answer the following question. What is the next thing that I need to do to create the change that I'm looking for in my life? Now, later on, you could go into more in-depth detail. There's all kinds of techniques like reverse engineering the solution. And you can do that. That's a totally different journal prompt, is reverse engineering the situation to get back to the next step that you need to take. But right now, especially if you feel resistance to what you're working on, or, I work with a lot of people where they've taken, they've had these big psychedelic experiences, and the answer seems so clear in that space. And believe me, like, I've had those experiences too. It wasn't just that one message from the mushrooms of, hey, you need to stop drinking. It was like every time I would take mushrooms, this would come up. Not to mention the misery that I felt every time I was way too drunk. But sit down and just be honest with yourself. What's the next thing that I need to do to achieve the goal that I'm looking for, that I'm trying to get? And if you don't know that goal, if you don't have clarity on that, then that's what you can journal on. You're listening to this, you're interested in it because it's resonating for some reason. If you're listening to this and you don't have anything that you're working on, you feel like your life is perfect, and you don't have any desire to do any sort of transformational practice, maybe this isn't the podcast for you. But if you're listening to this, I'm guessing that you do have an interest, or you're at least, curious about what things like meditation and breath work and, intentional psychedelics can actually help you accomplish in your life. So if you don't, you just have a feeling like, something's wrong, but you don't know exactly what it is, then that's the place that you can start. And then once you have clarity on that goal, then again, come back to what's the next thing to do that's going to move the needle. So there's 3 different options as far as journaling. If you don't have clarity on your goal, get some, write it out until you have that clarity. And by the way, just because you have clarity right this second doesn't mean that that can't change as you progress, as you start to move towards that transition. That's the first thing. And then what's the next thing that I need to do to move the needle, to move towards that change? And then also sitting down with that goal and reverse engineering it out. When you reverse engineer it, you'll start to see the areas that you do have a lot of clarity on, as well as the parts of it that aren't so clear to you or that you might need some help with. So there you go. There's your homework for this podcast. And definitely something that was very helpful to me as far as the not drinking anymore. The next thing that I wanted to touch on, and this is really important as well, and then it's going to go into the bigger part of what I want to touch on last, is meditation. Not just any meditation. I don't want you to start balancing your chakras or even doing something like, metta practice, loving kindness practice. I want you, if you're not already, to start simply practicing mindfulness. This is something that is a non-negotiable with my clients. If you're working with me, you're doing mindfulness. And you're doing mindfulness practice because of how crazy potent it is for transformation. You're practicing mindfulness because it is so powerful as a way to change your life. The first time that I got sober, and I'm talking about, this was back in 2003, 4, somewhere around there, all mindfulness meditation. I had a literal moment of clarity in the middle of a meditation. Meditators call that insight, but in the 12 step, they call that a moment of clarity. It's pretty much the same thing. And then this time around, in the story in which I'm describing, at the beginning of 2018, in the midst of starting to realize that things were not going to work themselves out or end up the way that I'd like, I did 2 things. I went back to therapy. That was 1. And 2, I rededicated myself to my meditation practice. I made the goal of, I'm going to meditate every day for this year. And by December of 2018, I was gone from that situation because it was not fixable. So meditation will do so, like, I can't even put it into words, like how important it is to meditate. First of all, I talked about how drinking was a part of my identity, or what I considered my identity. And meditation is going to help you separate your thoughts from who you think you are. They're going to help you see your thoughts and be less attached to them. You're going to kind of start to notice the stories that you're telling yourself and the inner narratives and the thoughts that are running your life and your current behavioral programming and where it's out of alignment. And again, we've talked about therapy and journaling and meditation. Those are all things that are going to show you where you're out of alignment. And then the first thing that we started with, the people and environment that you're in, that is a reflection of what's out of alignment. And once you can see what's out of alignment, then you can change it. It's giving you that clarity about what the goal is. In addition, meditation is also going to help the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which has helped me to stop drinking and continue that for the last 6 years, basically. And that's intentional psychedelics. And what I mean by intentional psychedelics is like not, doing bumps of K at a party. It's not taking random acid tabs at music festivals, which no shade, no judgment, like do you. I've had plenty of amazing recreational experiences with psychedelics and other drugs. But there's something that happens when you're more intentional about the work. And honestly, for me, even approaching it in sort of a do-it-yourself intention, not knowing about set and setting really, not knowing about integration, just even trying to turn a few degrees towards something that was more intentional and therapeutic really opened the floodgates to this seeing the bigger picture and where I was out of alignment and what needed to change. So psychedelics, but also being intentional about them, spending time afterwards, integrating, having some practices like journaling, like meditation that are going to support that integration. Hopefully having a therapist that is supportive of you doing work with psychedelics, that you don't have to hide that from, or that, that they're not going to pathologize or stigmatize you for, wanting to unpack the experiences that you're having. And obviously that's not going to be every therapist, but it is a good reason to work with, an integration coach like myself. It's one reason that meditation is a non-negotiable within my coaching, and it's a part of everything that I do. Whether it's you're coming to a single breathwork session, there's going to be some meditation. You're in my group coaching container. We start with mindfulness meditation and really get that down as a foundation before we move on to some of the more, intense practices. And, if you're working with me one-on-one, you're also going to be, learning mindfulness meditation. So super, super important part of my life, my practice, and what I feel like I can teach and support others with. So, if you're interested in any of those offerings, in fact, we have a new group coaching that's focused on breath work for psychedelic integration and how to get more out of your psychedelic experiences by using your breath. Mindfulness is a big part of that. It's starting up in about a month. So, hit me up if you are interested in learning more about that. Get on the email list, come to the workshops that we're doing. But, if anything in this conversation has sparked your interest, please reach out. Happy to talk with you more about supporting your journey. Without going too far down the psychedelic rabbit hole, the reality is that without integration, you're not getting the most from those experiences. And look at me and my example, like the mushrooms were pretty clear in their own way of like, hey, this is out of alignment. You need to stop drinking. You're not really happy doing this. And it took me, almost 4 years to actually really get that down and have it actually stick and be willing to do those other things that were keeping me in a place that was comfortable, which also involved drinking. The people that I was around, the things that I was doing in my free time, the way that I was dealing with my stress and, just my social life in general. So all those things are a part of my life. 2019 in February was when I made this conscious decision that I wasn't going to get drunk anymore. And it was because, I left the marriage December 2018. And then I spent, a couple months kind of grieving and processing and, out of whack. And through that, it was like, well, now there's no excuses. because there's no wife that wants to go out and drink with you. Your friends are going to keep doing what they're doing, and it's unreasonable for you to think that just because you want to change, it means that they want to change. So I'm going to change, and whoever wants to come with me is going to come with me. And some of them did. Other ones were like, no, like just come hang out at the bar and, drink seltzer water or something. And, that only lasted for so long. I invited them to hike. I invited them to ceremonies and sweat lodges and all the things that I started to do that were supportive of the life that I wanted to lead, which was doing more introspective work, doing more healing work, getting more honest with myself, and starting to ask more questions about what do I want out of life. And, you can't always expect that people are going to come along on that journey. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I don't love them. It just means that we're not, walking on the same path together. So journaling, meditation, therapy, really being honest with yourself about what do I want and what are the things that are out of alignment to those goals and the life that I want to create. And then if it fits your particular path, and it's not going to fit everybody's path, working with intentional psychedelics, whether that's microdosing some mushrooms or, finding someone you can work with to do a macro experience and be able to integrate it. Going to, a retreat center where you can work with ayahuasca or, another medicine. And then doing the integration work behind that. It's not just the psychedelic. Don't expect that the medicine is going to do the work for you, because it's not. The medicine is a non-specific amplifier. And what that means is whatever is going on inside of you, subconsciously or consciously, but especially subconsciously, it is going to amplify the heck out of that. It is going to make it so loud and so unavoidable. It's going to really put it in your face. And it might not be the easiest pill to swallow. It's probably going to be uncomfortable to have your own mind, if you don't want to acknowledge that the medicine has its own spirit, but that's a whole nother podcast. But to have your own mind be that honest of damn, I got some work to do. I got some changes to make. But that's where the real change is going to come from, is making those changes once you get clarity about what it is. The mushrooms are not going to be there every time, you want to have a drink or whatever else it is that you want to change in your life. They are going to let you know, with brutal honesty, how you actually feel about it. And then it's up to you to go and make those changes. And I've seen it time and again where it's it seems so easy when you're in the medicine space, when you're getting those messages, when that amplification is happening. It seems so clear. It's so easy. But then the day after, or the week after, the month after, is when the rubber actually hits the road and when that resistance starts to come up, because the habits that you have are so ingrained. And that's literally why I started to do the work that I'm doing now, is because I went through that same cycle too of oh, this is so clear, but if it's so clear, why isn't there any change happening? And the methods that I use in my coaching and that I share with others are what's worked for me. And now I've seen them work with other people too. So it's not that I'm buy my widget that you've never seen before because, this is what worked for me. No, it's basic stuff. And that's, maybe that's a good note to end on, is that oftentimes what you need to do, it's not exotic. It's not very novel. It's the foundational stuff. It's the boring stuff. It's getting up and meditating. It's writing in your journal. It's working out. It's choosing different friends and different social situations. It's saying no one drink at a time sometimes. Sometimes it's not an all or nothing thing. Maybe it's a harm reduction in the beginning. I certainly went through that as well. It was like, okay, well, instead of drinking 5 days a week, what if I abstain one day? And what does that do? And how does that make me feel? Oh, actually, I feel better. Okay. What if I abstain 2 days a week? What if I just take a break for the next month? But then I also noticed from taking a break that there was this obsession around the drinking. It was like, well, are you going to abstain today? Or are you not? Are you going to go out? Are you going to do this thing? Oh, that brewery has that beer that you've been waiting for. All these different things. And this actually came up a year ago. We went on vacation to San Diego, and I hadn't been to San Diego since I had been married. And when I was married, a big part of what I would do in San Diego was drink amazing beer. And so I found myself like not really knowing what to do. And then these thoughts started to creep in of like, well, okay, you haven't been drinking now for 4 or 5 years. Like, what if you just enjoy yourself while you're on vacation? And as I kicked that around in my mind, you know what ended up happening? It was like, I don't even want to open that door, because right now I don't have to think about it. I know that I just don't drink. It's not even a decision. It's just, there's a firm boundary there. If I open this door back up just a little bit, then I have to start thinking about, oh, am I going to drink today? Am I not? Do I need to get an Uber because I am going to drink? Like there's this huge amount of mental energy that gets expended in my experience. And that's another reason that I know I shouldn't drink, is like, it's maybe that, I don't know if that's what everybody else experiences, but it's what I experience. And me being honest with myself, it was like, no, you're not just going to have like one or a couple while you're in San Diego. Then it's going to like, the doors open a crack. And when you go home, it's going to be like, oh, well, what about this? Should I have a drink with dinner? Blah, blah, blah. And personally, I think that the way that I'm living is a lot easier. And I'm a lot happier because alcohol is a pretty low vibrational activity. And I just feel like I'm better without it. So those are the things that I've done. We could definitely like go more in depth on some of them, but that's kind of an overview, and it, is more information that I could give on, the response, like a, 90-second reel, or, commenting on this person's comment. But thank you for inspiring me to do this podcast. I hope that you go through those journaling prompts and that you find some value in it. And, there's lots of podcasts that can help you if you're ready to stop drinking. Certainly I welcome you reaching out to me and, setting something up. But even if you're not at that point yet, there are tons of different meditations and breathwork practices on this podcast. There's people talking about how to get more out of your psychedelic integration and so much more. This podcast is really about transformation, simple practices that can transform your life. And so if that transformation that you're wanting to make is to stop drinking, I got you. I've been there. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And I truly believe that the methods that I practice and that I'm helping other people with are a solid, consistent way to create those changes that you're looking for. So I thank you for being here. I invite you to reach out. You can go to bluemagicalchemy.com. You can also look me up on social media. I am Blue Magic Alchemy wherever you see that. Basically, most of the platforms I have some sort of presence. And, I hope that you found value and inspiration in this episode. So if it struck a chord with you, please take a moment and leave a review for the show. It's free. It's a easy way to support and help the show grow and get in front of more ears and eyeballs. Also, make sure that you're signed up for the newsletter at bluemagicalchemy.com so that you can get updates and be in the loop about events that we're doing and, the coaching offerings and different breath work. And there's new stuff all the time. You also get some really cool freebies for signing up. So it's a good way to get introduced to what we do around here at Blue Magic Alchemy if you're brand new. And other than that, thanks for listening. It's not just about the method that you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and to practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters. And I am honored to be a part of your journey. So please don't hesitate to reach out, to connect. I'd love to hear more about you, the successes and the challenges alike. Just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing because that's the vital point.